We don't subscribe to the old school way, nor the new school way, only the optimal way. The 80-20 Baseball Experience with Coach Bo.
Welcome, this is Coach Bo with 80-20 Baseball, and our mission here at 80-20 Baseball is to help players, and mainly coaches, discover those better, faster, more efficient ways to create a fun team culture, a more enjoyable team environment, while also developing better all-around players and team. There is a lot of clutter in the baseball coaching community, and I use my 34 years of experience and a lot of time each day that I sacrifice staying up with everything to filter it, to vet it, and to give you a clean, orderly, fast-paced version of what's out there and what you need to know as a coach and as a player. Now, before getting into the meat and potatoes of this episode, if you've been listening, and a lot of you have been for a while here, this is episode 30, I'd like, if you could, pause this episode right now, and if you don't mind, leave a positive review on whatever you're listening to this with, whether that's Apple Podcast or Stitcher or Google Podcast. And if you could just leave a positive review, that would be much appreciated. Now, only if you're enjoying it, and hopefully you are. If you've been with me, for the 30 episodes, I'm guessing you're liking what you're hearing, and I'll continue to improve the show, continue to give you really good content and really good stuff. It would be much appreciated if you could do that right now. Thank you. All right, today's topics. Number one, we're going to discuss one of the newest player development related books, and I'll share my take on it and whether or not I recommend reading it. In part two, I'll share with you the keys to effective baseball conditioning, and what I say may surprise you a little bit. And in part three, we're going to talk about how to judge and assess a hitter and how most stats are just a distraction from the important information that we need to gather when assessing the production from a hitter. All right, part one. One of the newest books out there. It was released March 31st, 2020. So it's been on the shelves for just over 2 months. I listened to this one on audible.com. I'll tell you what, the Audible narrator, I'm not sure what the name of the narrator is, but the narrator does a good job. I've heard him on other books. He does a good job. Most of the time, the narrators on audiobooks are good. They're professionals. They know what they're doing. Sometimes you get one that's not as enjoyable to listen to. This one was good, and the book itself was really, really, really good, and here's why. What it does is it weaves together, and when I say it, Jared Diamond is the author of Swing Kings. The subtitle is The Inside Story of Baseball's Home Run Revolution. Swing Kings, the inside story of baseball's home run revolution. Now, there's a professor, Professor Nathan, and I want to say he's at Michigan, University of Michigan. He's a professor that has looked into and does a lot of studies on baseball and has a fascination with baseball. You can go look him up, and he's well known in the baseball community, and he's been around a long time, and he quantified recently what he thought added to the increase in offense. And I know there's a lot of discussion in the baseball player development community that pitching has gotten substantially better and that hitters are actually trailing behind the pitchers, and the pitchers have made adjustments and done this and that. And in fact, the ERAs in the MLB, the amount of runs scored, has gone up almost every year for 14 straight years. It's gone up. The trajectory's been upward for 14 years. So a massive increase over the last decade plus in the amount of runs scored. So I wouldn't say that the pitchers are winning necessarily. Now, Professor Nathan recently, I want to say maybe 6 months ago, 5 months ago, maybe in December, put out a study that he did when he quantified how much he thought the reduced drag, so the physics of the baseball, the newer baseball that, I know the baseball looks the same to everybody watching on TV, but they've done some things to it and they've reduced the drag. So in other words, it carries further. And then you have the Swing Kings, the swinging upward, the increase in launch angle, which has gone up, and the launch angle, meaning that for most of you already know this, the angle in which the ball comes off the bat, it has increased. So hitters are swinging at more of an upward trajectory. They're not trying to Willie Mays haze it straight up into the air, but they are swinging for doubles. They are swinging to drive the ball into the gaps, and sometimes, they're swinging to drive that ball over the fence. Professor Nathan put together two numbers and he quantified it like this. The increase in home runs, increase in offense, he attributed 60% to the new ball and 40%, the uptick in offense, the uptick in home runs. He attributed 60% to the new ball, to the less drag, the ball being able to carry, the physics of the ball carrying further than older balls. And then he attributed 40% to the newer swings, to the, not necessarily newer swings, but the new approach that most of the hitters are taking now, where they're looking to drive the ball out there. They're trying to drive it to the gaps, off the wall, over the wall, rather than hitting the ball on the ground, which is, as if you read the book, which I highly recommend you go and read, baseball for years and years and years was the overwhelming majority opinion, and the overwhelming message from coaches, hitting coaches specifically, was to stay out of the air, stay out of the air. Those are easy outs. And lo and behold, hitting the ball up in the air like Willie Mays Hayes in the movie Major League, popping up the ball, yeah, that's never good. But hitting the ball on the ground is not as beneficial to run production as driving the ball at a launch angle of 15, 20 degrees, 25 degrees. In fact, I think the optimal launch angle for most hitters is between like 20 and 25 degrees, where a ground ball is going to have a negative launch angle. So the theory on this, Swing Kings, and I recommend you read the book. Basically, the book traces back the history of this swing evolution back 30 plus years, and then kind of explains and weaves together the story and the interrelated parts, the coaches that helped produce it and helped bring it about. Now, I've come on this podcast before, many episodes ago, and said, hey, the launch angle swinging up was being talked about by Ted Williams well before any of this stuff came about. But it was just Ted Williams. And then if you looked at swings like Babe Ruth and even Ted Williams when he was playing 70 years ago, they were not swinging down on the ball. Now, they weren't these massive uppercuts looking to hit the ball up in the air and like popping it up, but they're looking to drive the ball. And those hitters that defied and almost ignored or had ignorance towards this, hit the ball on the ground, stay out of the air, actually have had more success over the years. Now, there have been hitters that have elite speed or played on AstroTurf back when AstroTurf was super common and ground balls would more easily get through. So that did benefit some hitters, for a long period of time, and even speedy hitters now, that may definitely be more advantageous. But for the majority of hitters that can't turn 20% of their infield ground balls into base hits, like Billy Hamilton, the hitters, which is the majority of hitters, need to be swinging with a little bit of an upward path. And that's what this book talks about. Now go read the book. You could talk about how the angle of the pitch is coming down, like 8 degrees is like the average angle of the pitch. It's a downward 8-degree angle because the pitcher is throwing it to first off, the pitcher's on a mound, so they're a little elevated. And then their release point is, substantially above the glove, the catcher's glove. I mean, you're talking 2-3 feet above the glove, the release point. And now the pitcher, to get to the glove, certainly has to have a downward angle, and curveballs are going to have more of a downward trajectory than fastballs and whatnot. And so the downward angle of the pitch, the hitters, and in this book, Swing Kings by Jared Diamond, these coaches and these hitters are talking about meeting the pitch on its own plane and swinging with the plane of the pitch rather than down on it and trying to hit the top of the ball, yada, yada, yada. I'm just talking a little bit about what this book breaks down and what this book does really well, and what Jared Diamond does really well in this book, Swing King. He weaves this story together, and the story is about the evolution of a technique, the bringing to the mainstream of this technique. And it's not just about the bat path, but also some of the preceding movements. Jared Diamond takes the author of the book and makes it an interesting story. So instead of just being about the swing technique, which he surely does weave into it, it's the story of it. And the main message really is baseball has for years, and in my opinion, 2 reasons, been very insulary. It's been very insulated. The coaching, the baseball. I remember 30 years ago, my dad, who's not even a real, he's a baseball fan, but he's not a guy who has been in the baseball world. He's been a small business owner and he's a water chemist. He does water treatment. But he told me years and years ago, I swear it was 30 years ago, he said, hey, baseball's a good old boys club. If you're in it and you know people and you have the relationships in it, and it's hard to break into the game. So that's true, and it's definitely true. And now you're seeing it a lot. You're reading Moneyball was a big book and a big story with that, kind of breaking into the front front offices. And now this one is talking about breaking into the coaching arena and the coaching, environment within Major League Baseball and professional baseball by coaches that are not Major League Baseball guys. They're not, some of them aren't even really professional players or hitters themselves, and they just produce hitters that get results. It's really interesting. I always thought that was fascinating that Major League Baseball would. And in fact, when I read Moneyball, one of the first things that actually hit me was, they're going to do this soon with how to coach. Moneyball was all about front office and finding players, but really none of Moneyball was talking about developing players. And I thought about this 15 years ago. When Moneyball came out, I thought, if they're doing this now with this, it's only a matter of time before this gets into the coaching environment. Now, baseball, in two reasons, two reasons why I think it was so insulated and it was so hard to get in. One, ego, and I think coaches would have to admit they might have been coaching things wrong or techniques wrong. The other thing is job security. I think it's kind of like it was almost like politics, but not as, corrupt, right? But it was like, hey, let's just keep us all in here and keep all the jobs kind of to this group of guys, and not that they all knew each other, but it was kind of insulated. And that's my thought looking at it from the kind of the outside. And I did play professional baseball for a little while, but I've never been in a front office. But that's kind of my take from looking at it. Swing Kings, I think, is super awesome for coaches to understand. And then it also talks about some other videos to go check out and coaches you can go check out that have done an outstanding job of not being stuck with what they were told or coached to do. Not necessarily because that was wrong, but because they wanted to question it. And also, here's my main take out of all of this with the Swing Kings book. I'm going to take it even further here. And I'm going to say the pitching community could learn from the hitting community. The Swing Kings really boils down to this: a bunch of coaches that weren't tied up in the game and tied up with it the way it was and has always been sort of coached. And they started just looking at the great hitters of all time, and they started going, wait, what are they doing? And they would look at slow motion video, and they would look at the hitters that produced the most runs, that had that, added to the offense, not necessarily the highest batting average, but the hitters that produced the most runs and helped their offenses the most. And they started looking at their swings. And Tom House had a book years ago, and Tom House is well known in the pitching world. Tom House had a book, I believe it was called The Perfect Pitcher. I'm looking to see if I got it on my desk here. It's called The Picture Perfect Pitcher. Came out January 1st, 2003. I got that book probably the same year it came out, and I've had it for, 17 years almost. And it was interesting how Tom House took that, and Paul Reddick was the co-author on that they looked at pitchers that had been successful for a long period of time, that had stayed healthy, that had the best ERAs, not necessarily the guys with the highest strikeouts or the least walks, although that's a big part of it, but really it was boiled down to the pitchers that gave up the fewest amount of runs over a long period of time, over a long career, and stayed healthy, obviously, because they had that long career. And they looked at the commonalities amongst all those pitchers. And that's what this book really talks a lot about. Or the book Swing Kings breaks down these coaches, these hitting coaches, and the hitting coaches were going, hey, I know I've been told this, I know I heard this, I know this is how it's taught, but this is not what the best hitters of all time are doing. They're doing X, Y, and Z, and thus I'm going to coach X, Y, and Z. Now, in the baseball community right now, and this is something that frustrates the heck out of me, you hear this all the time. I bring up things and I get told this all the time. Well, everybody's different, and what works for them doesn't work for them, and you can't just teach that because, hey, I'm telling you, there are commonalities in the pitching world, just like in Swing Kings breaking down, as Jared Diamond breaks down with these coaches, Craig Wallenbrock, Doug Latta, Robert Van Scoyoc, these coaches that what they did was just look at the hitters, the best hitters of all time, especially back with Craig Wallenbrock and Doug Latta, and they look at these hitters, and there was a couple other coaches in there, Bobby Tewksbury, a couple other coaches that are mentioned in this book that really just said, hey, these are what the best hitters are doing. This is what Barry Bonds is doing. This is what these great, now get away from the Barry Bonds performance enhancing topic, yada, yada, yada. Barry Bonds is an elite hitter. And what these guys would do is they just took these elite hitters and said, this is what they do. And I'm telling you, in the pitching world, this is what you need to do. If you're a young pitching coach, or if you're an older pitching coach, or if you're a pitcher, look at the pitchers and the commonalities. I have done 2 episodes on this. I have an article about this called Copy Correctly on the website 8020baseball.com. I even list the players at every position that I think we should copy based off of production, not my thoughts and not how flashy they are, but on production. I even break down every defensive position and give you the top players in terms of defensive runs saved and zone zone ratings, and then I have the pitchers that you should look to copy when it comes to certain commonalities. I also did a podcast talking about spider flaw. There are all the great players of all time have had some sorts of flaws. Now, guys like Barry Bonds, guys like Greg Maddux have had few flaws, very few, even just minute flaws, but they have all had some kind of flaw for the most part. Now, some of the great hitters and great base runners and great infielders and great pitchers of all time have little flaws that it's important that we don't copy those flaws. I call those spider flaws. They are super successful in spite of a few flaws. But what you want to do to make it easy is look at the commonalities. And I'm telling you, the pitching world, the pitching community needs to move forward with this and go, hey, what are the Randy Johnsons, the Greg Maddoxes, the Roger Clemens, the Tom Seavers, the Max Scherzers? What do they all have in common? The Pedro Martinez, what do they all have in common? These are pitchers that pitched a long period of time and had a lot of success, and we need to look at what they had in common. And that's what this book does in terms of discussing hitters, or well, at least in terms of breaking down the coaches and their epiphanies of looking at the great hitters. It wasn't as though they had super, high quality technology or super sophisticated technology. Not that that can't help, but all they did was look at video and go, well, and some of these guys were using VHS videos, old school, regular slow motion, sometimes not even slow motion video, and they were saying, what are the best hitters doing? And a lot of times they would even have these hitters say they're doing X when really they were doing Y, because the video showed Y. So it's kind of like you want to hire a major league player to be your hitting coach. I've seen this with Pedro Martinez. He knows pitching. He didn't just go out there and just kind of get by with just this uber crazy talent. He was talented and he did have some things genetically, but he was a smaller guy, a small frame guy, and that guy dominated. He dominated, and I've heard him on MajorLeagueBaseball.com, or it was MLB Network, tell the audience that when he landed with his front foot was not pointed towards home plate. When he landed, his stride foot, his left foot would land closed. That's not what you see in video. That's not what you see on photos. He wasn't doing that. He was landing almost straight towards the plate with his foot lined up, facing directly almost towards the plate, slightly turned in, slightly acute, maybe a few degrees. My point is this. Look at what the great hitters have done over time. Look at what the great fielders do and the great pitchers. And I think in the pitching community, we got a long way to go with this, because it's I know one of the biggest frustrations they talked about in this book, like Craig Wallenbrock's biggest frustration was like, he just wished it would have been easier to get out there faster and that it wouldn't have taken so long. I think he's like 74 years old now, or 73 years old, and he would have just wished it just would have come to fruition and helped a lot more players a lot sooner. And that's what I'm telling you with the baseball pitching community. We need to start looking at going, we don't need all this technology moving forward necessarily. I like technology, don't get me wrong. I love it for gamification, competitions, quick feedback, getting player buy-in. But when it comes to figuring out the best way to pitch a baseball, those guys have already figured it out. There have been pitchers that have figured it out. The baseball field dimensions have been identical. The baseball has almost been identical. Home plate has been identical. The pitching motion has almost been the same for how many decades and decades and decades and decades. There's nothing that hasn't really been figured out. It's not technology. It's not an iPad. It's not something that you can keep adjusting and improving. There are too many strict parameters when it comes to baseball. It's not this infinite amount of ability to be creative. There are parameters and the laws of physics. I'm telling you, it's been figured out with pitching, but I want to digress. I know I'm going off on a tangent. This is one of the things that frustrates me, that I think is a huge competitive advantage for pitching coaches right now, that go and look and see what all the best pitchers have done. The long-term successful pitchers, look at the commonalities, see what they're doing, striding straight, leading a little bit with their hips, loading on that back pelvis, etc., etc., etc. All right, topic number 2, conditioning. Conditioning, baseball player conditioning, team conditioning should be built into a fast-paced practice. And if it's added as its own segment of practice, conditioning should be a skill and position-specific activity. Give you a specific example of this. I'm a huge fan of just building conditioning into practice. Fast practices. Not only are your players going to get better and better shape, they're going to get better cardiorespiratory endurance, which isn't super important in baseball, but definitely can help. It doesn't hurt, right? I love it when coaches build it into practice. They have fast-paced practices. Now, if you're going to do conditioning outside, if you're going to do this kind of training outside of the typical practice routine. I highly recommend you do a skill and position specific activity. For example, pitchers should not be running poles. They should not be running long distance unless they're super overweight and you're trying to help them with that. That's different, but that's not baseball related. That's more just overall health related, I guess. Bartolo Colon is still pitching all right, but just overall health related. Yeah, you might have him do a little extra, but when it comes to skill specific, position specific conditioning and training, I would have him cover first base, rapid covering sprint over to first base and keep that going, covering home plate, backing up bases, covering bunts. Big one for me was just covering first base and covering home plate. So I would have my first basemen and second basemen back in the hole, the 3-4 hole, and I would have my pitchers cycle through, one after another, quick, and they would cover first. And I'll tell you what, after 10 minutes of doing that with just the pitching staff, they were exhausted. Not only that, how many throws and how many feeds the first baseman and the second baseman got. Now, second baseman would be getting the feed if that ball goes back in the 3-4 hole. I would put the first baseman's back a little deeper. One of the big flaws when coaches cover first base in practice with their pitchers is they have the first baseman too close. If the first basemen are close, they're just going to take that ball themselves in a game, but that's not the practice of the drill. You want to put them back on the edge of the outfield grass with the back of the infield dirt. You really want to just challenge them to make a long feed, maybe an underhand feed kind of on the run, an overhand feed. They might drop down and make an overhand feed. Second basemen are coming over, sliding over, getting the ball in the hole and then feeding it to the pitcher. You want to rep this. And I'll tell you what, you do that enough, your guys are going to be gassed. They're going to be gassed. How about this? You line up 3 catchers behind home plate by the backstop. They each have a bucket of baseballs, maybe a pile right in front of them. They're on a knee or in a position where they've just got the ball. They've sprinted back to the backstop. They've got the ball and they turn around and they fire the ball to the pitcher covering. And then you can rotate. Boom. The catchers rotate. Pitchers, boom, 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 one after another. They get there. They set their feet up. They pop the tag down in the right spot and then they rotate through. They hustle to the side. Boom. The next pitcher's coming. And you can do this really quick by having, say, the rule would be, hey, the next pitcher goes as soon as the pitcher catches the ball from the catcher, or as soon as the pitcher catches the ball from the first baseman or the second baseman feeding them, or whatever it is. So you have it built in. You're not sitting there yelling, go, go. And then there's this quick routine and they go through it. Boom, boom, boom. Imagine sprinting from the mound, the rubber to home plate, sprinting and then jogging back. There's no walking back, jogging back, sprint, jog. By the time they get back, they might have a little bit of time, but it's like interval training. It's an absolutely great way to train. Base running is great for all your position players. All your position players can do base running. Have them do steal jumps, competitions. Put a cone out there at 60 feet, 80 feet, 40 feet. If you want to really work on the jumps, get a cone out there at 20 feet and really challenge them to get good jumps. Don't let them walk back. Have them backpedal back. Have them jog back. Have another group ready to go so there's constant action. Boom, boom, boom. They're running the bases. Fast. Moving them around. You got outfielders. The drills should be, you can just have drills where they're sprinting to the gaps and hitting instead of just doing a random relay drill where you just have lines of, the traditional, hey, line up, these lines of 4 players and they just throw back and, and they have a relay race and they're working on their relay throws. How about you have the outfielders sprint to a ball in the gap and have them on the other side of the field sprint to a ball in the other gap and have 2 sets of throws, maybe going to home plate, offset your catchers a little bit so they don't have the throws coming and hitting each other. You can have them doing a lot. Ground ball drills, fast, boom, boom. Challenge them, having them go in the hole, having them backhand, having them move, boom, boom. Get the action going. Fast-paced scrimmages. Build up a fast-paced practice. Here's the biggest thing you're going to get out of it. Players are going to have fun. They're going to like a fast-paced practice. Yeah, they might not look forward to the speed of the practice, but they're going to love, and when I say speed, the demand of the practice, but they're going to love how fast-paced it is. So you're going to get the conditioning built in, and remember, baseball is not a cardiorespiratory demanding sport. It just isn't. If you want to have players do a little extra running because of maybe they're trying to, cut back on some weight, or maybe you got a high school kid who's already a type 2 diabetic and you want to have him get a little bit more running in and, help his blood sugars or whatever. You have just a player that just needs to, shed some weight. Yeah, so you got to be careful with that so you don't put him on the spot necessarily, but you also don't want to sugarcoat things. So there are a lot of ways you can get the conditioning built in, but if you're not going to do it built in, you're going to do it after. It's got to be specific. I highly recommend the only group that does it specific would be pitchers, maybe afterwards when they're doing that stuff, but even PFPs. I've had my pitchers in 15 minutes of PFPs sucking eggs. They were breathing so hard. They looked like they just ran 3 miles at full speed and they got through their PFPs. It's fast. They get a lot of action. The only caveat to that is you don't want to put anybody in a situation they're going to get hurt. So you want to make sure you're safe with that. All right, part 3. Don't judge hitters by strikeouts, by the amount of walks. Judge hitters by how many runs they produce or help produce. This is a way I think is super easy for major league teams, college teams, even advanced high school teams have statistics that can really help them. Major league teams use things like WAR, or WAR meaning offensive wins above replacement. My favorite stat is weighted runs created plus. That's a stat that every major leaguer has, minor leaguers, and those teams, actually the major league teams probably have access to college stats. They can figure all that out because of draft purposes and things like that. And even college teams can do that on their own, especially the college teams with big budgets. But high school teams and definitely youth ball teams, you're not going to, you can use like on base plus slugging, OPS. Now there's a little issue with that on base percentage and slugging they don't use the same ratio. Like slugging is out of 4,000, so you could have a number over 1,000, where with on base percentage, the max you can have is 1,000, or basically like 100%. I'm not sure why baseball does that. That kind of gets me off on a tangent. Batting average. Why is it he batted 304? Why don't they just say he batted 30%? Why don't they just use like he batted 310? Why can't we just say 31%? He batted 250. Why not just 25%? Why do we have to add that extra digit in there? Anyways, I don't want to get off on too much of a tangent, but you get my point. But you could use OPS. That's an easy one to figure out. Slugging percentage and on base percentage. A lot of these apps that you can use for your like game changer and things like that can figure that out very easily. One thing that I think would also be a good way to do it, especially for youth coaches, would just track total bases. When I say total bases, you could do total bases per at bat. Total bases per at bat. And I would qualify any at bat, like even a walk or a hit by pitch, as an at bat. I know that doesn't go into batting average, which is why batting average is also flawed. 1, it doesn't count walks. 2, every hit is considered the same value, when that's obviously not true. A home run or a triple or a double is definitely more valuable than a single, and it doesn't count the walks. So an easy way to do that would just be total bases divided by total number of at-bats. I think that if you really wanted to be really accurate with this on a youth level, I would break it down into simply how many bases that the player earned on his own. Now you can do this 2 ways. You can just do total bases divided by number of at bat. And you can include all the bases that that hitter gets to, even as he's a runner. Say he gets to second base on a double and somebody drives him in. That would be 4 bases because he got the home plate. Now, I think him scoring from second base on a single by another hitter, or by a double by another hitter, or a hit by one of his teammates, I think is not clearly indicative of his contribution on those last 2 bases. But it could be maybe he got a great jump on a single and scored from second when maybe another hitter didn't or wouldn't have. So you could count that, just say, hey, total number of bases, because at the youth level and the high school level, there's going to be a lot more taking advantage of passed balls, balls in the dirt, stolen bases, and things like that. So definitely, I would look at it like you could do it where you count all the bases that the hitter got to, including all the bases he got to as a runner, or if he got moved forward with a subsequent hit by a teammate or a walk or whatnot. Or you could get a little bit more accurate and do it like this. He gets credit for every base that they earned themselves. For example, a stolen base would be a base they earned. Or maybe they got a great jump on a base hit, like I said just a minute ago. Maybe they advanced from first to second, maybe from second to third, or maybe they scored on a pass ball, getting a good jump, being ready. Sure, the pitcher and his wildness and the catcher maybe not catching the ball might have played into that, but you could do it like that. I mean, if you really, really want to get, finite with it, you can look at it like, hey, he got a good jump. That was a good read. I mean, if the pitcher throws a pitch off the top of the backstop and the runner advances to second base from first base, maybe you don't count that. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But I think you could just keep it simple. Total bases. I think total bases is super important, divided by number of at-bats. Make sure you get a rate. It's always about a rate, because there may be a player on your team that only gets 2 at-bats on average a game. Maybe he doesn't play every game, or he only plays half of a game. So it's not fair when you're doing a total unless you do it out of a rate. You got to do it out of total number of at-bats. So don't use batting average. Don't do strikeouts. Don't do walks. I wouldn't even do any of that. Now, you could get even more fine out with just quality at-bats and just separate it by at-bats. But I'm talking about total offensive production, because if a guy steals bases, maybe he doesn't get a double. Maybe he does get a single and he steals bases more frequently than one of your power hitters. And that's not always the case, but at least it's about scoring runs. That's the main idea here. When you assess a hitter, when you assess an offense, the number one thing, the only thing that matters is how many runs you guys score, not how many strikeouts or you don't have, or how many walks you have, or how many hit by pitches your guys get because they get on the plate and are tough, or how many of this, or how many singles or bunts or or whatever. All that matters is that you score runs, and that you score as many runs as you can. So when you're assessing a hitter or an offense, all that matters is what was their contribution. When you break it down by the individual, what was the contribution to the total number of runs scored by that hitter, by that player? Or as a team, all that matters is your offense should be judged on how many runs did it score. When I hear things like, oh, the hitting coach got promoted because his team batted .299 and that was the best day batting average, I just tune that out. I mean, not to be mean. I mean, it just is. I don't even listen to that. First off, if you use batting average anymore in baseball, if you talk about batting average, you're way behind the times and you don't understand the value of offense. All right? You just don't understand it. And it's not nearly as important. What's important is runs, not batting average. Runs win games. Batting averages don't win games. Yeah, there's a correlation. Yeah, there's a connection, but sometimes it's not as close. And sometimes the team with the highest batting average is like 6th in the league in total runs scored. I'd rather be 1st in runs scored and 6th in batting average. Runs is the name of the game. Same with pitching. Doesn't matter how many strikeouts or hits you give up. It's about how many runs you prevent or don't give up. So that's a paradigm you got to have as a coach when you're assessing players. You can figure out your own kind of statistic that works for you. The advanced levels, you already have this built in, weighted runs created plus. Youth coaches, maybe total runs divided by plate appearances, including walks and hit by pitches and things like that. So total plate appearances. Now, if the hitter is still up to bat when a guy gets thrown out stealing second in the inning, that doesn't count as an at bat, right? So there you go, guys. I recommend Swing Kings by Jared Diamond. I did the audiobook, but again, it's not about just racing through the book. It's about getting the message and really understanding it and getting something out of it. Topic 2 today, we talked about how conditioning should be built in to a fast-paced practice. Players should be running around, sprinting around. Get it into your base running. Do fast-paced base running. That's always the easiest and most efficient way. But when it comes to other things like maybe PFPs, or maybe you just line up your infielders and have them just sprint the field, drag bunt after drag bunt. Maybe your outfielders are just sprinting to get fly balls, sprinting. You're not just hitting them right to them. Maybe you're hitting them off to the side and they're just sprinting to get them. Maybe you have all your outfielders lined up in center. You hit one to left center. They got to sprint to get it. The next guy in line, boom, as soon as you hit that one, you turn around and have 2 fungos going at the same time and have another one getting hit over to right center and have them sprint to get that one. Everything should be about building the conditioning into a fast-paced practice, so at the end of practice, you don't need to waste any time with getting your guys into shape. When it comes to strength, that's different. When it comes to strength, your players will get that built into a fast-paced practice. They will get stronger, but you'd like to step it up and have a fitness program on the side for strength and mobility and things like that. All right, this has been Coach Bo. This has been episode 30. Go to 8020baseball.com. Check out all the stuff we got over there. Love being here with you guys. You can tell I'm passionate about this. If you want to reach out to me, 8020_baseball at Twitter. I'm not a guy who just sits there and pumps out a bunch of stuff every day just to put out a bunch of noise and clutter. If I put it out there, it's something that I really feel is important. But follow me on Twitter, and you can email me at coachbo@8020baseball.com. All right, guys. Have a great day. Take care of yourself. Take care of your loved ones, and we'll catch you on the flip side. Bye for now.
This has been the 80/20 Baseball Experience.
This is a really good team, and so you have to earn everything you have against them and take opportunities when they present themselves.
Take it to the field.